In a wealthy European city, there lived a businessman named Jonathan Whitmore. He was one of the richest men in the region, owning multiple companies, luxurious mansions, expensive cars, and hosting endless extravagant parties. But despite all his material possessions, Jonathan had no real friends. He saw people as mere tools for success, willing to crush anyone who stood in his way. Jonathan once had a loving family, but his pride and ambition drove them away. His gentle wife, Eleanor, had often warned him, saying, "Money can't buy love or peace of mind." But Jonathan never listened. To him, success was everything. One day, while sitting in his high-rise office, Jonathan received an unexpected call from his lawyer. The tense voice on the other end informed him that his company was on the brink of bankruptcy. Bad investments, betrayal from business partners, and an economic downturn had caused his empire to collapse in just a few months. At first, Jonathan refused to believe it. But reality hit hard as the bank seized his assets. His mansion was auctioned off, his luxury cars were towed away, and his employees abandoned him one by one. Within a year, the once powerful billionaire had become a homeless man with no house, no friends, and no family. Now, he wandered the streets, where the very people he once looked down upon now gazed at him with scorn. One night, as Jonathan sat shivering in a dark corner of a park, an elderly man approached him. It was Father Matthew, a priest from the local church. He sat down next to Jonathan and handed him some food. "Would you like to come inside the church for shelter?" Father Matthew asked with kindness in his eyes. Jonathan scoffed, his voice filled with bitterness. "If God really exists, why did he let me lose everything?" The priest smiled gently. "Maybe he didn't take everything away from you. Maybe he's just clearing out what wasn't needed so that you can see what truly matters." Jonathan fell silent. For the first time in years, someone was talking to him without wanting money or power in return. After that night, Jonathan decided to visit the church. At first, he only wanted a warm place to stay, but soon, the sermons about compassion, forgiveness, and God's love began to touch his heart. He reflected on his past mistakes, the way he had mistreated others, the opportunities he had wasted to do good. He began to pray, something he had never done before. Slowly, Jonathan stopped thinking only about himself. He started helping other homeless people, sharing food, and listening to their stories. He realized that true happiness didn't come from wealth, but from giving and caring for others. One day, while working in the church, Jonathan unexpectedly saw Eleanor again. She had come to volunteer with their son, David, whom Jonathan had not seen in years. David looked at his father with unfamiliar eyes, but Eleanor saw something different. She saw that Jonathan was no longer the arrogant man she once knew, but a man who had found true meaning in life. With tears in her eyes, Eleanor said, "Jonathan, you are not the man I once knew. But maybe you've become the man you were always meant to be." At that moment, Jonathan realized that God had never abandoned him. He had taken away his wealth, not as a punishment, but as a way to lead him back to what truly mattered: faith, love, and family. Years later, Jonathan became a philanthropist, using his experiences to help those in need, especially people who had lost their way like he once had. His life was no longer luxurious, but his heart was finally at peace. He now understood that God always has a plan for everyone. And sometimes, loss is just a blessing in disguise. And as Jonathan looked back on his life, he simply smiled, knowing that God had been there all along, even in the moments he felt most alone. The message of this story: white heavy checkmark faith is not something we hold onto only when life is easy, it's what helps us survive the hardest trials. White heavy checkmark forgiveness is not just for others, but also for ourselves. White heavy checkmark kindness and love are more valuable than any material wealth.